Well, welcome to the show, Jessica. I'm so excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we already were geeking out before we hit record, and so it's just kind of like, okay, let's just start this thing. It's just SEO is just such a deep topic, so I'm really excited to pick your brain, and I know that you have just some amazing data, surrounding the pandemic and how really the world of SEO has been changing, especially for therapists. So super excited to have you on.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Like you said earlier, we could probably geek out about this stuff all day and talk about it,
Yeah,
but pick a
absolutely.
few things to focus on and give people some tips.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get into what we're going to talk about today, I always love to hear people's stories. So tell my audience who you are and what you do, and also want to hear your origin story. How did you start doing what you're doing now?
Absolutely. So, I had a chance to work for some amazing places prior to having my second kiddo, but when she was born 3 years ago, I decided to try the whole private practice thing. So I literally started my private practice on my maternity leave. During my maternity leave, I was signing a loan, looking at spots, all of that. And as soon as I went back from maternity leave to my former job, it was kind of like they knew it was coming. I'd given them a lot of notice. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to start building my practice. So I did. But the thing about starting a practice when you have a young child, two young children, I had what was he? He was 3, almost 4, and a newborn, was that some of the marketing strategies other people were using weren't going to work great for me. My time looked different. We paid a
Yeah.
sitter just for the hours I saw clients and 15 minutes on either side.
Wow.
So it looked a little bit different. And people would tell me, you've got to go do all these networking things. And I love people, I'm a people person. But I didn't want to pay a babysitter to be with my newborn while I went to have coffee with a million people. So I tried a little bit. And the truth is, I already had a lot of friends. They were sending me clients pretty quick. I filled way past the number of hours I was supposed to be working for a week. I was originally going to do 10 hours a week. I got up to like 30 clients. And then my husband's like, that's it. That's enough. I'm like, you are right. And so
Wow.
we had a couple of friends that were like, hey, can I come work for you? And I said, sure. So they came on as 1099s. And I found that when people would call me, they called for me, for Jessica, not for, and so convincing them that like, hey, I've really carefully chosen these couple of associates was hard. And so that's when my SEO journey really started. Was I realized if people could find the Aspire website, then it would be an easier sell. And so almost from day one, not quite day one, my name has been listed at the bottom of the drop down menu for our therapists. So when people find Aspire online, they're not calling for me. And it's really easy then for us to have the conversation of, well, who is the best fit for you?
Yeah.
And so SEO, I literally that first year, I don't even know how many hours. You probably can totally relate to how many books I was reading, every webinar I could find, every podcast episode I could find, every free course, then some paid courses as time went on, just trying to figure out. And so I'd be like, I'd learn, meta description. Somebody would mention meta description. I'd geek out and I'd spend like 2 weeks figuring out what a meta description was. And I wrote some terrible ones early on. And we slowly started to see the results and things increased, started getting more clients, started expanding our practice, moved into a bigger location. And then when I went to slow down school in Michigan a couple of years ago, some friends from much larger areas than mine. Told you I'm from mid-Missouri. We're a little bitty. So I thought that all this, I'm like, great, this works in mid-Missouri. But my friend in a much larger area was asking questions. And so I'm like, well, here, let's just stay up late and do a couple of your pages. And we got a couple of her pages from page 10 to page 1 in a week. And I go, wow, this stuff doesn't just work for me. It works for other people.
Wow.
And
That's awesome.
yeah, that's how Simplified was born. She's like, I would pay you to do this. I was like, are you sure you would do that? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, cool. So now we're 2 years later, we have 4 staff members, 3 to 4, and we optimize pages around the country, sometimes in a little bit in the UK, a little bit in Canada, nobody in Australia yet. So but we're having fun with it, and I really enjoy training other people to do their own SEO. That's kind of my bread and butter. But we found that there's huge demand for us to optimize websites. And so we also do
Yeah.
that sometimes as well.
That's awesome. I always love talking to people who are doing, who have started in therapy and counseling, and then they started doing this other thing, and like seeing that sort of take off, because I love that you've got that inside view because you did it for your practice, and now you can apply what you did to other people's websites and businesses. And
And
I'm not a therapist myself, but my wife is, so I have a little bit of the inside view because I work with her. And I think that that's important, like being able to work with someone who understands and gets it.
I think it's critical. I tell people all the time when I'm talking about keyword research, I'm like, go ask somebody that's not you, somebody that's outside our field, what would you search for? And you're not allowed to ask your husband because or your
Right.
spouse, because we've all corrupted our spouses. You understand
Yeah.
mental health way better than the average person. My husband can talk about validation with the best of them.
Yep.
So he is not the person if you want a non-mental health view. And I'm sure, you're not either. But I'm actually, we still 2 days a week. Typically, right now, the whole world is upside down. So my schedule is upside down. But typically, I still spend 2 days a week in the office. We have seven therapists and an admin person, and so I've realized during this pandemic, I think I need to reduce my clinical hours to about 8. That's really hard for me to
Mm.
admit, but it seems like it's working and is a good number. So I think that that's kind of the direction I'm going to have to head. But I will never give up counseling completely because I
Cool.
am passionate. But that's long-term results. Even when I'm doing trauma therapy and in 3 months somebody gets better with SEO, it's long-term as well. But
Yeah.
I can see in black and white numbers, like specific numbers showing that we're doing good. Whereas
Yeah.
with counseling, I take scales and measures sometimes, but I can usually how it works. What I love about doing the two jobs is usually how it works is the SEO stuff's going really well and we're getting huge numbers for clients, huge growth. And there's a couple counseling clients really struggling. And then the next week we have a couple really stubborn websites that Google seems to hate. And I have counseling clients that are making huge gains. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I can take a break and rest somewhere that something is going well most of the time.
Yes. That's awesome. One question that came up for me, just listening to your story, when you talked about, you started building a group practice and people were coming to you because they saw your name, so what was the process for that? Did you have a website that was all about you and then you started adding your other clinicians to it? Is that what happened? And then you had to backtrack and sort of revamp the website?
Yeah, I think I got a website initially because that's what you're supposed to do to look credible. So yeah, at first it was all about me. About the time that I had done the website, I was starting to recognize that I might move into the group sphere. So it did say a lot of like I, me, et cetera, et cetera. But luckily it wasn't as brand based with my name as some of the people that I've talked to since then have been. But yeah, so then we did transition into group practice fairly soon afterwards. I started I started seeing clients, I think actually May 2017, and it was November when I started my associates first started seeing clients.
Wow, that's great.
It was fairly quick, and I think it was over the summer that I developed my website, so it wasn't too far down. I hadn't gone too far down the rabbit hole of marketing for a solo
Great.
practice.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, so today we are talking about specifically COVID-19 pandemic has obviously changed the face of everything, how we do business and how we live life, and also SEO. And just like you said, you're seeing the black and white, the numbers and the metrics and the keywords and really how the landscape is changing. And you wrote an amazing blog post, a guide really to how to do SEO during COVID-19. And we'll link up to that in the show notes. And I thought it was fantastic, just lots of details in there. But I thought that we can kind of go through that and you can just really share with us, share with me what you're learning about this situation. So I'll kind of just give it over to you and I'll ask what questions come up for me. As I said before we started, really treating this as I am your student and I am just excited to learn the things that you have seen. So I'll let you take it
Well,
away.
feel free to hop in wherever you want to. I ended up writing the guide. I had to break it into 2 blog posts because, man, I realized that people don't read a 4,000 word blog post. I wish they did because great SEO, but they're still very long. But people have been asking me a lot about SEO and COVID-19. I feel like it's all I've been talking about. And we have a secret Facebook group for our paying clients. And I do a Facebook Live every Sunday. And pretty much, as you can imagine, every week for 6 weeks or so now, it has been all about COVID-19. And each week I get on and I'm like, guys, I'm no expert. Here's what I'm seeing. I've never lived through this. You haven't either. But here's kind of the data, and we've had a really close eye on the data. We have the advantage of having so many websites. And the initial thing that we saw was in most areas of the country, and it's different. And certainly our clients, especially like in the UK, that was way before us. And so I didn't know when I got an email from a client in the UK that was like, I'm suddenly getting no calls, but it says I'm still ranking. What's going on? I didn't realize that was about to hit all of us. But each part of the country seems like there was 1 week that was defining where calls just suddenly dropped.
Yeah.
We went from, there was 1 week we had, I think about 25, which is about typical calls for us. And everybody was full. So we were turning people away, having no idea what was coming. I mean, I knew what was coming, but I didn't realize the huge drop we'd see. And then the next week there were like 4 calls. I mean, that's really significant. So we had, so most people had this big drop in calls. When we look at the data a couple weeks later, we realized that what happened was it was like people just suddenly stopped searching, period. People's rankings stayed the same, or, if we were working on their SEO, we can see that it kept getting better, but nobody was looking. And there were people that reached out to me for consults because they're like, my website must not be performing. And on the consults, I was like, look, I'd love your business, but to be honest, I don't think it's the rankings. And sometimes it was. We did, oddly enough, have a couple people whose rankings tanked the same month. Everything went down, but most people, and then they started with us. But a lot of times it's just people stopped looking. And my theory is people are in shock.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think that people were in that basic needs part of it where they were so focused on literally survival. Can I pay my bills tomorrow? Can I feed my family? Is it safe to go outside? That thinking about that next step, we're all, as therapists, we're all going, oh, they're all going to be traumatized and they're all going to need us. But that wasn't how people were. They knew that, but they were, I think, very focused on basic needs. And so I think that that's, when I talk about SEO strategy right now, I think that has to come first as just this knowledge that impressions stopped. That means people stopped searching for our services. Therefore, clicks stopped. Even people who are doing searches weren't clicking as much. But if your ranking stayed the same, if you're still ranking, if you were on the first page of Google before and you're on the first page of Google now, then even if you didn't have calls lately, it may not be that there's some huge problem with your website. It may be that people were in survival mode for a while. They're starting to just now kind of come out of that. We're seeing, let me pull it. I have Google Trends like pulled up over here because
awesome. I love it.
Yeah, we are seeing finally, and I never use Google Trends, by the way, normally, because most keywords stay very stable. But we're seeing a pretty steady incline the last few weeks in both searches for online counseling and online therapy. At first, there was not online, online as well, but also just counseling and therapy in general. And so that's huge for our field. Telehealth, we saw this huge initial spike, and so everybody wanted to target telehealth as a keyword. And again, I was like, okay, slow down. How many people are searching for telehealth because they want to go see their primary care physician? We don't know. We didn't really have a lot of that information. But so I think that that's kind of step one, is just recognizing that that there was a change, and then from there, kind of figuring out how we adapt long term, if that makes sense.
Well, just to go back a step, I'm just thinking about the clients that I've been working with. I've seen very, very similar, like same exact pattern. It's like you see, I forget exactly what like the week was, but you could see the drop in like mid-March where everything just kind of dropped off. And what you're saying makes total sense. Like it's not about online marketing. It's not about really SEO so much. It's about human experience and how everyone was really just trying to survive and make sure like they have everything that they need, And so I know I wasn't really I was just watching the news, that sort of stuff. When are they closing Georgia? When are they doing this and that sort of stuff? I wasn't really learning about online marketing from my own research at that point. So I'm sure pretty much everyone else was doing the same thing.
I think what's funny is I did the same thing everybody else did. My little guy was finishing up therapy. He was like in the process of termination. And I immediately was like, well, there's no way I'm taking him to the counseling office before I'd got an email from her. And so I emailed her and I was like, look, we're going to put pause right now. And she was very understanding. It was great. And then a few weeks later, I was like, okay, how's it looking? And so he's actually doing online telehealth. He's not even 7, he'll be 7 next month. But it's been interesting. I don't specialize in children. I did some work with kids earlier in my career, but had stepped away from it. And so it's been an interesting experience. But I think it's funny that even I did the exact same thing that we saw all of our clients do. And
Right.
I'm like, wow, I'm just going to own that I'm human. And I knew at the
Yeah.
time that support is still needed. I understood it, hopefully better than the average person, and still got into that freeze, fight, or flight mode of like everything in our life needs to go on pause. And it did. Our life needed to go on pause. But I think that's interesting. And then the next kind of step that I did, kind of just being me, we had never marketed for online services before. I had a few therapists that offered it, but had never approached it. So over one weekend, the weekend I moved my office home, one of my SEO specialists offered to write an online counseling page for me. I'm like, go for it. And I wrote a blog post. Two of my therapists wrote blog posts related kind of to online counseling. And luckily we already have trust with Google. So it's much easier when Google already trusts you for one thing to get it to trust you for another one.
Mm.
But we put those up, optimized them, and got us ranking really quick for online counseling, thinking that'll soften the blow. That's all we need to do is just that. That means we'll get lots of calls. And, we're ranking for online counseling now. So people have called for online counseling. Interestingly, we've had inquiries from overseas, 3, my
Wow.
VA told me, which is interesting. But, that still didn't like automatically mean all the people were there. So I think the next kind of SEO strategy that I fell into and really think is important is creating content that is really useful for our clients. I know content creation is kind of your thing, so feel free to hop
Yeah.
in. But I've seen a lot of people talking about this, like, do we or don't we post content about COVID? I had somebody express concern, like, Google's not going to like it if I talk about COVID-19. And so I've been kind of watching to see how true that is. And I haven't seen any truth to it. I don't have Google's algorithm. Everything I say today, keep in mind, um, the reason I've waited so long to speak too much about this is because I did want to see what would happen long term. So I don't have Google's algorithm. But what I've seen is if you're writing content that's relevant to the rest of your website, Google knows that. And so if I started writing a bunch of medical advice, Google would figure out, I don't know what on earth I'm talking about. Like, I have
Right.
no credibility, but I do have credibility when it comes to mental health. And so we started creating a lot of content around the coronavirus specific to the areas of therapy we do. So if you're an eating disorder specialist, writing about how to manage binge eating disorder when you're home all the time because of the stay-at-home order in your state, I believe I've noticed that seems to be 100% okay. It's providing genuine, helpful
Right.
content that will also have the added benefit of helping your SEO. Um, and so I don't know, what do you have any? I know you're a
Yeah.
content guy.
You're preaching to the choir, really, because yeah, absolutely. Like, sort of my soapbox, or something that I just tend to say over and over, is you have to have that foundation of content on your website, number one, if you want to rank. And Google is so smart, it knows if you're trying to game the system, in which, I don't think anyone listening to this right now is wanting to game the system. They're wanting to reach the clients that they know that they are skilled in helping. So as long as you come at it from a place of service, I speak a lot about gratitude, and like a blog is a great way to offer free service to someone before, free education before they step foot in your counseling office or on your your online counseling office nowadays. And so if you come at it from a place of service, Google can see that. Google's smart, and also your clients can see that. It's not really about being salesy, it's about being helpful. And these are the questions that clients are asking. They're at home, maybe some of them have a little bit more time, so they might be on the internet a little bit more, and like, how do I manage my depression when I'm at home all the time? I can't get out, because of COVID. So I think that's right on. I mean, that's exactly what I would have taught or done for sure.
I love that you brought up that that blogs are a way to serve our clients, because that's something I think some people struggle with writing blog posts because they see blog posts as just being for SEO. And I think when you
Yeah.
just see it that way, it would be difficult to find the motivation. I think a lot of times what I think is like, what information do I wish my clients had before they walked through my door? Or what information can I share that's going to help people that never walk through my door? I'm private pay. There's a huge portion of the population that will not be able to afford our services, and that's fine. But if we can offer them some tips and some hope and some, techniques and things they can try and some psychoed through our blog posts, then that's huge. And right now, especially, I think that, as therapists, if we're able to provide, if we have the emotional and mental energy, which I know is really hard for, there's a lot going on. So no pressure if you don't, but if you have the ability right now to write some informative blog posts, um, people need them. I'm getting lots of social shares on our blog posts. People are, reposting them at record rates because our community is hungry for the information
Yeah.
that we have. And I really, I've gotten messages from friends who've seen my blog posts and have said, thank you so much for that. And that's the best thing. And my friends obviously are never going to come see me. um, but to know that I provided that assistance to people
Yeah.
is I think just really valuable and really neat, and has that added SEO benefit. And so some of our therapists that we work with have been writing, like, the ones that normally I'm like, please write a blog post, are now writing, or pay someone to write a blog post,
Yeah.
are now writing like two. We have a couple of people that have written 2 a week for weeks, and we're like, well, just remember, consistency is important. But I'm like, what incredible information. It's great. All of my SEO clients are writing blog posts I'm sharing on my therapy Facebook page, because they're writing such great content with real
That's awesome.
information that needs to be shared with the world. And so I think that's always a good SEO strategy. I think right now it's a really cool SEO strategy because, again, it's doing more than, especially when you're writing in your purview, whatever you're really good at, sharing that, and Google will know that that is consistent with the rest of your site. Again, probably not the time to give out medical advice or talk about something. Never do you want to talk outside your area of expertise, but do share what you know. I think that there's no problem with saying the word COVID-19 or coronavirus on your website. You don't have to avoid it, like I've heard a couple people worry about. So the next thing, I know you build websites, so I'm curious your thoughts on this. We know that Google has always wanted people to have secure websites, that security certificate. Do you think, I'm thinking, my prediction is that will be more important than ever, because I've heard of some hacking going on with websites and such like that the last couple months. Have you heard any of that? Do you have any? I'm curious your thought
I
on
have
that.
not heard any of that. I mean, I've just seen how important it's become for Google as far as like the ranking factors go. It seems like a few years back it was maybe lower on the list, but now people are talking more about it. It's just like, have that SSL certificate on the website, make sure that it's secure. And nowadays, because Google is considering that, I just tell people, just go ahead and do it. It's you can get a certificate for what, like $70 a year or something like that, and just put it on there. That's something that we include in our websites that we host for free. Absolutely. Because it's just, that one's easy because you could just check the box, like, my website's secure. Whereas the other stuff is a little bit more ongoing, keywords, all that stuff, but at least you can just check that box secure. So I'm like, why not just do it?
We had a client get hacked. It was the first time I've ever had one of my SEO clients get hacked. And they dealt with it and handled it really well. But yeah, so then I was doing some research, and a couple of things that I had read had talked about, like, that hackers have more time to, or something. I can't remember exactly everything that I read, but I read a couple different articles, and I'm like, we've always recommended people do this, but we're this month kind of taking a
Yeah.
look at every one of the websites that we help with and kind of pointing that out. And so if anybody listening hasn't looked at your website, just look at your URL and see if there's an S after the HTTP. And if there's not, then either look up how to do it, or reach out to your website person and say, hey, can you add this security certificate? Because I think that sometimes some of the things that I talk about, especially kind of the way that I go about it, are time intensive, creating whole new pages and stuff. But if you can find the low hanging fruit, like making your website more secure, please do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Start with some of that, I think is good.
Yeah. And what are some other
So,
things that people can be doing like right now, like in the middle of this?
yeah, I think keeping an eye on keyword research, Google Trends. I think I mentioned a minute ago that like I have it up all the time. Google Trends is really cool. You put in a keyword that you think people might be using, and you just and you can compare it to other ones. Like I like to compare therapy and counseling, and then you can pick the state that you want to use, and you can see literally like week by week for the past year what the trends have been. I think that I literally have been looking at that every couple of days. We're looking at for each of our clients their specific states, because again, like we're finding that there was this huge dip, and then you're able to see when it starts recovering, and it feels really good to be like, okay, people are starting to search again. So that's kind of one. Another one is updating your Google My Business listing. We know that Google in particular, this doesn't necessarily help you, I don't think, for other search engines, but I know that Bing has kind of a similar thing. But we know that Google My Business and SEO seem to go hand in hand. That is, your Google My Business listing is updated and complete and all that good stuff. You see an increase in SEO. As your SEO improves, you seem to be shown more often in Google My Business results as you build that trust. And so going on now, I think, is a great time to just take a minute, go on, add an update about if you're online or whatnot, make sure all the information is correct, that sort of thing. Kind of doing the standard stuff, but making sure it's updated. I forget to update my Google My Business listing. I like never remember to.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those things that most people just set up or don't set up, and they just kind of forget about it. It just kind of sits there, but you can actually, publish stuff on there and keep it fresh, and Google loves that.
I have clients that are great about every single post publishing it on Google My Business, and that is awesome. I don't do that, but it's a good thing, I think, to do for sure. And then the next thing that I always talk about, but I think even more so right now, is focusing on conversions. If we know that your website is getting fewer people right now, and fewer people are searching in general, then I think that it is more than ever a time to focus on conversions. And there's 3 points of conversion I think that I think of. The first is when you show up, it's never enough just to show up really high in search results. You need people to actually click on your website. And so when I think about that conversion from someone that's viewing your website to someone that's on, or someone that sees you in search results, someone that's on your website, I think about meta descriptions. That is an SEO title for a page, and a meta description is really all you have to convince somebody to actually click on your website. And so it's a great time, if you have some downtime right now, to take a look at all of your meta descriptions, making sure a couple of things that they accurately reflect what's on the page they're going to. That sounds obvious, but sometimes we can get so like focused on saying something catchy, or on the other end, saying something that, has enough keywords. I've seen it to both extremes, where you end up being like, people are bouncing off this page and this meta description doesn't really explain what's on the page.
Right.
And so, or you've updated the page and now the page is kind of about something different. You forgot to update your meta description. So I think taking a look at that. And also, I think that there's this whole continuum with writing meta descriptions between being very, very catchy, like I kind of just said, like being very catchy and sing-songy and high, focused on catching someone's attention, versus like stuffing it through full of keywords. I've seen some meta descriptions that are like a list of keywords. That's not going to convert anybody. That nobody's going to click on it. So I think that there is a happy medium. And sometimes you swing more to one end or the other, but taking a look right now and figuring out if you already rank really well, taking a look at how you can change those to be a little bit more focused on conversions, maybe adding, I like call now to the end of a meta description sometimes, because it's kind of that call to action or learn more or something like that if you have space for
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
description.
That's great. And just to clarify, if anyone's listening and they didn't maybe have heard the term meta description for the first time, those are the couple of sentences that appear on Google search results pages, and you're able to change those on a page by page basis on your website, so they appear in Google search results. So I love what you said. Just like try to get that balance between having the keywords in there that you need, but also just being like straightforward and really informative, and getting those to convert. That's great. That's something people can definitely do now, and just kind of look through their website, see how your descriptions are working, and also see how your website is looking as well. You know, if you haven't touched your website in a long time and there's things that you can do, definitely try to take the time and start getting that, you know, really working for those few people who are landing on your website now.
Yeah, I've in the past month made some visual changes and had someone else make some visual changes to our website. Honestly, I wish I had time to redesign it right now, but I don't. But we did, I changed several things visually, and then I rewrote a couple pages, and I have a therapist that specializes in grief. I hadn't touched my grief page in 2 years. It was one that I'd written. She now gets most of our grief, and so I'm having her rewrite it more in her words. And so that really did two things. First, we've got to focus on conversions. The way that I wrote 2 years ago is not what I would ever write for one of my clients now. You know, it's not great. I knew nothing about copywriting. And then second, we're kind of anticipating what the needs will be in the future. So the pages that we've focused on copywriting right now have been like our trauma and grief and anxiety, things that we know are relevant right now, and that people,
Yeah.
when they move out of that basic survival mode, they're going to be looking for our services, but certain services they're really going to be looking for. And we want those pages to really be ready to convert as more people are going to them. We're seeing people love EMDR right now. And so we offer EMDR we have a trauma page and an EMDR specific page. And both of those I took a look at the copy for, and then the grief, because we know we're going to have people looking for those things. And we
Right.
want our pages ready to convert the people when they do arrive. And so more than just getting people there, it's funny. I always say, do what I say, not what I do, because my site hadn't been updated very much. But I didn't need to, because there were such huge numbers of people going to our site that I didn't have to worry about conversion.
Right.
There was no concern for it. And so I've known that my copy was out of date. I've known that visually it wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. And I knew that I wanted to go back. It's not that I didn't care. It's that the time wasn't there. It didn't seem like the top
Yeah.
priority. And when the numbers dropped, it became the top priority. And we're
Right.
starting to get more calls now. And we've had several people in the last couple of days book. And so that's really good. Maybe some of that copy editing has paid off.
Yeah.
But I think that it's definitely a time to like focus on conversion. Maybe send your website to a couple of friends and say, what would you recommend that I do differently? If you've ever wanted to build a new website, it's probably an okay time to do that. Because when people come back, I think they're starting to, but I think we'll really be seeing the effects of this over the next few months. And
Yeah.
having a website that's ready to go for that, it's a really good use of your time right now.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that that's a good segue right there to talk a little bit more about what do you see coming for the future, and, you know, SEO and for therapists.
I think that online therapy will always be a more competitive space. I have been helping therapists rank well for online therapy for 2 years, and I've never really found it. To be honest, we've never, that I can think of, had anyone that we tried to get ranking for online therapy in their state and couldn't. We have kind of a formula almost. I created a video back in, I think, October for a couple people that had asked around online therapy. And I'm like, look, it's harder because you're competing against like BetterHelp and that sort of thing. Those big, Talkspace, all those big names, but it's doable. And here's how you do it. And it was like this formula. And I was so excited about it. But I think that now everybody and their uncle is trying to do online therapy. Like, I
Yeah.
can't even tell you how many online therapy pages we've done in the last 2 months. It's been huge. And so I do anticipate that will never go back to being as easy as it was to rank for, because I think more therapists are going to be online, and all these therapists,
Right.
if nothing else, there's been a huge infusion the last 2 months of people optimizing those pages. And so I think that that will be more competitive. I think that the trend, that the words that people use may be a little bit changed. Yeah, that security might be something that will continue to, and we know it's going to be important. Google has told us for ages that it's important. But yeah, those are kind of some of the big things that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Is that you're going to have to do more than what I did in a weekend of throwing up an online therapy page and being like, here, look, we now offer this. Google, give us credit. I don't think that it's going to be that easy anymore. And we've seen that a couple of our pages this month, we've had to work really, really hard to get the movement on online pages that typically we would have gotten, I don't want to say effortlessly, but would have been much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of my biggest questions that I really wanted to ask you, even when we first set this up, was about that topic. And if we just spend a few minutes just talking about like some tips that people can use, because I know in the last couple of years, I've had definitely more clients who have come to me like, I need to redesign my website and I want to add online therapy, but like all their content and everything was all about, therapy in Atlanta and, very specific to the location. So I'd love to hear just your advice on how someone can add online therapy, because now you could market to your whole state if you're licensed in your whole state. So do people use their state as a keyword? I just want to pick your brain on that. So let us have it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you do use your state as a keyword, but the odd thing about it is that not everybody knows. I think one of the biggest challenges that we face with online therapy marketing it is not everybody knows to add like in Georgia, right? I mean, like
Right.
people are often searching for online therapy near me or online therapy, period. And that's where
Right.
it becomes really hard to compete with these huge companies who make tons of money and pay therapists very little is what I hear. I don't know. I've never signed up for one, but that's, the word on the street. I don't want to diss them in case I'm wrong. And there's some really great ones. But these big companies that are in every single state and have like huge, huge marketing budgets so I think that, but we have had a lot of success when we get somebody ranking for the state and we're really clear to Google where they're located, that Google a lot of times will show people when they're searching for online therapy and they happen to be in that state. But how do you do it? I think the biggest thing is it's not unlike local SEO techniques. The difference is it's statewide. And so if I'm writing copy for an online therapy in Georgia, for instance, page, I'm going to make mention of Atlanta and Savannah. And I'm not great with geography, but so what I usually do actually is I pull up a map of that client's state, and I'll try to pick kind of the, at least 3 corners ish of this reference, and even a rural area. Like if you're in rural southern Missouri, I might refer to here in Missouri. My husband's from like the rural part of Missouri. Like Shannon County is like the biggest county because it's extremely rural. And so I might make mention to Shannon County if I was writing one in Missouri, just to help. I might be the only one referencing that county. And so that will help tell Google that I am there, that we are there. And similarly, if you are, let's say, licensed in multiple states and you want to target multiple states, then I usually recommend a separate page for each of those states. And if you have 3 therapists, they're each some of them are licensed in one state and some in another state. That gives you a really good excuse to have multiple pages, because on each page you can talk about which of your services are provided in that particular state. And you can make reference. One of my SEO clients did something brilliant the other day. I had talked about this, about having unique content, having each state have unique content, lots of, plenty of words. And she goes, okay, and I said, put a couple photos up there. And she did this really cool thing where she went and she found like 6 photos per state, made them very small, made this grid, and put a caption for each photo so she was able to get keywords that said where in the state that photo was. And so it looked,
that's great.
Yeah, and how she designed it looked visually pleasing too, which I think is you don't want to look cheesy, like I'm just trying to appeal to the people in
right.
But like she actually made it look visually pleasing. And so now in the captions of those photos, she has references to 6 different areas of her state per page. And in a way, again, that looked nice. And she's like, is this okay for SEO? I'm like, that is perfect for SEO because you now have reference to all of those areas. And so I think, I'd say that's kind of the general strategy, is making sure that you give Google all the information you can
Yeah.
about where you are located, even putting on the bottom of your website, serving anyone in, Texas, Georgia, Florida, whatever your states are, so that is, again, you're similar to how you would put like the location, your address on the bottom for a brick and mortar place, putting that state, those states. And,
Yeah.
in general, that's always been enough. Now, I think that additional content may be needed, such as blog posts that specifically target online counseling and those states, maybe more than one or two blog posts even,
Right.
that sort of thing. But just, you've got to give Google the information.
Yeah.
Here you are.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Wow, that was just a lot of just great value right there. So thank you so much for that. I think really what I'm hearing overall, like running through it, is just Google is smart and they know where you are, which I think is encouraging. Like some people are like, oh, Google's so smart, like how am I ever going to rank? But if you tell Google where you're at, where you're located, repeat that, throughout your website. I love the what you said about including just different cities and areas from your state. Google will understand that. And again, if your content is there and you're serving your clients and you've got that foundation of content, Google will understand it.
Yeah. And doing it in a natural way, like we'll be like, if you're stuck in rush hour traffic in Atlanta or in rural such and such and can't, trying
Right.
to incorporate it semi-naturally into your content. Google is smart. What I love about Google is that they truly want to give the viewers a good experience. They want to match people with the right websites. And so
Right.
it's not that they're not ranking your website because they're out to get you, which sometimes it kind of feels that way, but it's that you haven't given Google the right information. But if you give them the right information, they do care about quality results. And so I love the rule in with my clients is, when you outrank Psych Today, you have to like take a picture and send it to me, because I do a happy dance,
That's
because it is
awesome.
possible. It's possible, but it's really hard to do. Similarly, I think when you're an online practice and you outrank some of those big ones, it may take time. It may be a long-term goal. It's probably not going to happen as fast as you want it to in the middle of COVID-19, but it is possible. I've definitely seen people do it. It's just it's not the quick game, and it's not the I write one meta description and I'm beating really huge companies that spend thousands of dollars
Right.
a month on
Yeah.
SEO.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome. Oh, this has been so good. Thank you so much for your time, Jessica. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you do and SEO?
yeah, simplifiedseoconsulting.com is the easiest place to find us. And from there, we have a 7-day email series that does basic information about SEO. We have blog posts, all of that good stuff, and information about our services as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was fun.
Absolutely.